Um, we're beginning the meeting of the F&B meeting on January 21st at 7:35. If there's no objection, I'd like to change the order of the agenda since we have a quorum. Um, I'd like to move the vote on the minutes, and then I want to make an amendment to the minutes so we have Pierre's name properly spelled. So, can I have a motion to amend the minutes? Louisa and Doug, thank you. And then can we vote on the minutes as amended? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. So I want to start on the education part of it, but not just at a high level, but also let's get into some of the detail on the numbers that we have already and talk about that. I spoke to Peter. We were at the meeting last night, as was Beth and Laura. And um, I want to give this example just because it's the best example of schools that I've heard. Um, if you're making blueberry muffins and you're making high quality ones, you get to pick what size blueberries you get, whether or not they're sourced locally or from a distance, what their age is, what their color is, everything along that line. You get to choose your blueberries. In public schools, you don't get to choose your blueberries. So you have some that are more mature, some that are less mature, some that are big, some are small, some are slightly purple, some are blue. And yet, if you look at the strategy that's been expressed about the graduate student up at that top, you still have to produce a quality blueberry muffin. And so, a lot of what we're hearing being presented, and I think, Peter, you did a good job explaining it when we were talking on the phone. They have the MTSS, which is going to be the data line for this. Then they're looking that they have the literacy coaches, the instructional coaches, and there was another coaching situation that they were talking about in special ed to handle behavior. That's for working on the teachers
At the elementary
and
level.
the elementary level teachers, which, by the way, in each school is typically only 3 teachers per grade, to establish what's necessary so that they understand and know how to interpret the data as well as fill it. And they are teaching for all students and they know how to make that change there. And so, Peter, I'll let you go and talk about what we were talking about earlier today.
So, thank you. What we're really seeing, and I obviously welcome Beth's input one way or the other. What we're seeing is, at least I interpret it as trying to establish a more broad-based, better qualitative foundation at the elementary school level, especially. And um, the most of the changes. Let me back up just a little bit. We're all happy with 3.8%. I think that's great. That's almost the starting point. But what Jack has been, I think, is trying to emphasize is what's behind this. And what we're seeing behind it is a concrete, detailed plan that the superintendent, Dr. Byrne, has said will not be implemented overnight. This will not change immediately, but will take years, several years of consistent implementation. But the ultimate result, desired result, is to create a better foundation at the elementary school to help address, I would say, not to essentially address problems, but to just give people more tools to succeed at an earlier level, which will obviously pay off down the road as the students advance through the system. But the other aspect I liked was that when there is success, through this program, that success, I think the expression Beth was, he said, we need to protect it, protect the success and make sure that we're always monitoring it and still trying to get better. It is we're not just happy being good. We want to be really good and we want to keep on being really good and emphasizing that throughout the system. And I like that philosophy. Um, Part of what was described was a system where there will be coaches at the elementary school level where there is a cohort of senior experience. I don't know what if there's a
Coaches.
certification,
There are
Beth.
actually coaches in New York City
Yeah,
and in New York that
yeah.
actually do this.
So, and what I found most interesting is that while they will have certain subject matter expertise, they will not be involved in the assessment and evaluation of the teacher, which I think is actually the most important part of the whole thing, because that will allow teachers and their coaches to establish a bond that they can have where they can feel free to speak candidly, feel free to make mistakes without worrying about whether or not something is going to affect their ultimate evaluation. So, um, I think that's about the best synopsis. Beth, do you have anything you'd add to that? And same thing with Laura.
I also learned that the coaches have a lot of special credentials,
Yeah,
which really differentiates them from the instructional aides, and they're highly qualified and highly accredited.
yeah.
I have a question if Beth doesn't have something to jump in on.
Go ahead.
Um, it occurred to me, like, I forgot what the statement was you said about, maintaining the quality and consistency, but I know that retention is an issue, right? So you train, particularly at the elementary school level, the teachers, they get all this extra coaching and everything else. Is there some discussion about how to retain these teachers? Because some of them are traveling a long way, they want to get trained up, and then they move
Yeah.
to schools closer to home.
Pear, very good question. I think Jack and Beth and Laura will concur with me that retention was in fact one very important part of this program, and that is trying to keep our teachers and this is they're working on a professional development program which is going to be more in-house which I think the theory is that this will encourage uh, better professional development as opposed to uh, taking the time that the all the prior setup for professional development was doing.
Well, there
So
were also a lot of the contract that we just approved had retention oriented aspects to it.
yes,
So
Like,
you could get college credits internally,
Hmm.
and therefore get to the next level.
and
You
all,
could, there's money and payments for not being absent, for staying there for some time. And so that's going to be there. We adjusted some of the lower level um, um, grade levels so that they were very competitive with the other. So if you are in an environment where you know you're going to improve, where you know you're going to be taken care of and supported, and you can also have a path to essentially earn more money, um, that those are good things for incentives. Now, there will always be those that leave. Not much we can do about it being in the tail stub of Connecticut and the traffic to get here. I don't know how else to put it. But the but we have seen usually the people that I see that leave are some of the more experienced teachers who now are willing to go um, to be closer to home, because one of the things that when Malloy was governor, he was talking about is handing the pensions back over to the towns. And the state teachers union was vehemently against that. And the reason was for a couple of reasons. First of all, they had no way to divvy up that if I worked 10 years at Norwalk and 10 years at Darien, who's paying what. But currently, the teacher's pension in the state of Connecticut is transportable.
Mhm.
So, assuming it's the last 3 years of your salary, you can earn 20 years in one town, work the last 5 years in another, and it's still a 25-year pension contribution.
Mhm.
So if they gave it back to the towns, which I don't think we were too concerned about because we could have totally funded the pension plan by issuing a bond and thereby significantly reduce the amount that we would owe. And that was one of the conversations. But it would mean that there would be less mobility for senior teachers going around the state. And so that never happened. But I do believe that the teacher contract and some of their efforts are there. There is a new program that they put in, which was in the financials. I need a little more information on it, but $200,000 holding place for in this year's budget for early retirement for certain teachers. So I that was put into the December financials. Um, and so I need a little bit more information on that because every February I go and give an update on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed budget. And as of December, they're up about $400,000. So, um, and we don't know what ECR will eventually be. So we don't find that out until later. But we do have some estimates. I'm going to be sending out some modifications to those two sheets because when Peter, Beth, and I met with Eric and Rudel et al., one of the things I asked for and we asked for was a reconciliation and historic reconciliation of the ECR calculation, what was budgeted, what was actually determined. And Eric and Rich actually put it into the budget book, which reminds me, we have some extra budget books. If you haven't picked it up, go to town hall. One there is for Peter. He's not in town today, so don't take his. But please go to the town clerk, and there's books for F&B there. So, I still like a book.
Wait, do you mean the like Board of Selectmen budget books, or do you mean Board
There
of Ed?
is no Board of Selectmen. This is the Board of Ed
I
budget.
didn't think so, but they're a town hall, not at central office.
Yeah, we transfer them. My instruction was anybody who went there early could get it. And I think, Laura, you picked yours up, if I'm not
I picked it
mistaken,
up at the Board of Ed
as,
on the
as did
table.
I.
As did I. Yeah.
Yeah, and I ordered 8. So I'd actually like to keep one for John because he's new, and so he can go to sleep reading it. But if you want one, I didn't assign any names to it.
I'm going to go get one tomorrow, but I kind of put faith in you, Jack, and Beth and Peter on going through this education budget. My question, though, is what's happening with the trend? And I know it's a small part of the budget, but with substitute teachers, because I just remember when I was in school, whenever we had a substitute teacher, it was like a day off in class, and it seems to me like there might be a pretty good trend of more money being spent for substitutes, and I wondered why and what the future is with that.
That is something we have interns there that take over classes. We also use teachers to fill in for other classes as well, so that if a teacher is out and the teacher has a free period, they'll cover that class so lessons continue. Typically of the same grade or maybe a third grader teacher will fill in. but we do have interns in those schools that get assigned to fill in. And if there's a long-term disability, we hire a long-term substitute to fill that
Well,
spot.
someone at the DMA said they were substituting this past week at the middle school behind me here, and they said, "I see your house from where I'm my classroom," and I was like, "You're teaching?" And I was really surprised that this person was still, cognitive enough to be a substitute teacher, but you know,
Yeah, don't mention the name, Doug, please. Uh, they the fact of the matter is look, substitutes are always a problem. Um, but what's there? But Darien tends to be a little specific in who they allow to substitute. They're not looking for a babysitter. They're looking for somebody who can move forward on it. But sometimes you just need somebody to fill a spot. We have had administrators go in, if we can't find a substitute, to go fill in. But it's not, it's a minor part of the budget.
yeah, it's a minor part, but do we have a really fast upward trend in it? And is it because of the transportation
No,
here and the
no,
weather that people can't make it?
no. It's and part of the reason in the budget where we now have, if you mix only X number of days per semester, is to, you know, some of us when we were working full time, you got X number of vacations, X number of personal days, and some of us somehow always seem to have days to carry over. And I think in some other professions, when you have 10 days off, people take the 10 days off. Now, could be because I have to take a child to a doctor, this or a child sick, or other things along those lines. Remember, we have young parents out there who are teaching, but for the most part, they've been addressing that over the last couple of years. So I'm going to let the professionals decide how to do it. We haven't seen an upward trend. In fact, in our substitutes, we've actually been controlling what that amount is.
One
All
thing
right.
I'll add before I go is, um, and again, I think that Beth and Jack and Laura would concur, is that for the first time we've been looking for a plan for a while, and we have a plan now in terms of how the superintendent wants to implement changes in how our kids are being taught. And most of the changes in the budget are clearly linked to that plan. And that's really good.
Well, the other thing is, if we don't really take a deep dive, um, is that there are two drivers this year that are really keeping this budget at a 3.88. The first one is we've had 5 students return from outplacement. That's generating $1 million of savings in special ed. Now, we'll see a reduction in what the calculated excess cost reimbursement is, which hasn't been qualified yet, but that's $1 million savings there. The other thing, which will be discussed next Tuesday, is the self-funding of health insurance. Now, I have many expertise, or some that I at least think I have. That's not one of them. And so anyone who has experienced or gone through that has some knowledge, please put together some questions that we can ask to get answers to. Because that's going to be one of the other major drivers in the budget savings, because we've been seeing 14, 15% increases at the Board of Ed health insurance based upon the experience rate. We had 20 or so really heavy hitting expenses over the last couple of years. So they understand that they have to put in caps, funds, and other things like that. But, we haven't seen the details yet, and that's on Tuesday. So I'll also tell you something else that I'm working on just to make everybody aware. Um, as you may know, Sunday into Monday is going to be a significant snowstorm, or at least it's predicted to be that. I have proposed that we move the Monday RTM meeting, which we can, to a virtual meeting. Our moderator wants to move it to Tuesday in person because Kumbaya is more important than having people there. I'm very blunt on this.
But it's the Board of Ed meeting on Tuesday.
And there's a lot of us that I know are going to be at the Board of Ed, which is more important than that RTM meeting, quite honestly. I also think that people have plans that they typically might have on a Tuesday. So if you know that Monday's your day for the RTM, that's what you have there. And if you had other obligations or plans, you may not show up. So you're going to have a lower capability. So I have a phone call into him, and we'll be speaking to him tomorrow. If you look at the agenda, he said we might move it to Tuesday, and I'm going to advise him not to do that.
Is that a moderator decision or is it a rules committee decision?
The moderator or vice chair of rules can make certain decisions without the rules commenting. But if need be, I will speak to as many rules people as I can to tell them no promises on that, because they may disagree with me. But I know that we have at least 4 rules members here that might agree with me. For those that don't know, Piers on rules, Beth and I are District 3, Peter's District 6. Here, you're District 4? Yeah.
Hey,
So,
Jack, that's not a big RTM meeting on Monday. We could easily do that by video. I mean, it's going to be a big storm. Just it's so easy to do.
right. And I'm not sure everybody's road will be cleaned up by Monday or other things like that. And
It's
so,
kind of silly.
right. So it's just like, let's just do it. It turns out the only thing we'll be voting on is the 27,000, because the easement is going to be pulled because they're still in negotiations.
Exactly.
And so it's that. We can move the ethics vote to February if need be, and the ethics committee. And it's listening to John.
I heard the ethics committee hasn't had a complaint to hear in like over a year. So one more month's not going to change. They haven't even met for the.
Well, people are still on the committee until they're replaced. So we have 3 individuals that have their term expiring. Okay.
And one moved out of town. I know that.
Yeah. Beth Pope moved. So there's 4 potential openings, but the 3 that have their term expiring are still serving until their replacement is announced. So we're going to say goodbye to Peter because he has an obligation and is not in town. So he can go to his appointment. That's why I got the minutes done early. All right, Beth, I'm going to throw some stuff on you now.
Okay.
We've had a couple of episodes talking about curriculum, sports, the special ed, and I forget the other area that they talked about.
I mean, the other thing was just the general schools budget.
Right, the schools. Thank you.
It was like Darien High School, Middlesex Middle School. You get the idea.
Right. Can we talk about some of the numbers?
We can talk about some of the numbers.
Just like the sheet that they said that these are what's changing.
Oh, like in the presentation.
Yeah. And just go for the big ones. I don't care about peanuts. But I think we should be talking a little bit about numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think what our committee name is, we should mention a number periodically.
It probably does make sense to do so. That having been said, I would have pulled it up if I'd known you were going to throw this to me.
Oh, well,
So give me
I
a
have the,
minute.
I have the,
He has so
um,
much confidence in you, Beth, that he
But
knows
like
you're
I've got
always
8 million
ready.
tabs open.
Yes, he
Laura,
knows you're always ready.
do you have the various packets? I have two of them handily.
I've been trying not to print them because
Beth, did you
honestly,
get
like I'm running low on printer ink. So I've been trying
Well,
not to
to be
print them.
honest, I was printing them with color and I had to replace my blue cartridge.
Yeah.
So everything else is now going black and white. Um, so
Uh,
let me just go from a high level here.
yeah. I mean, like for the, this is like the
So
current year.
I have some here. The Middlesex World Language Teacher is a reduction of 1 FTE. Darien High School has a zero point 0.6 reduction for mathematics. The high school also has a zero point 0.4 world language teacher reduction, and DHS English has a zero point 0.2. I have never figured out how that works because if you're supposed to be teaching 5 classes, I don't understand what's going on there, but that's what we've been doing. We also, the director of security position has been eliminated, and we're moving to a agency that will have multiple people to help with instruction and training, and they'll manage the security at the schools.
and
And
I'm assuming that we won't be paying insurance because the company that we're hiring as a consultant, they're covered with their own insurance. So are we saving
yes,
on
but
that?
we are still paying for the security guards.
No, no, no.
So
But
we,
the
yeah, I'm not worried about, yeah, they have their own insurance on that.
got it.
Personnel additions, we talked about the elementary instructional coaches, and they're going to be working maybe for 4 weeks with a grade in a particular school, and they'll rotate from school to school and go for one aspect of instruction. They're not doing everything, but they'll pick one aspect of instruction and work with these 3 teachers on ensuring that everybody's doing that. And as Peter said, one of the nice things are these instructional coaches are not admin and they're not input into somebody's review. We needed to add another FTE at both Henley and Holmes based upon the enrollment. We have another one, Middlesex, a special ed teacher, and an EOP psychologist of zero point 0.2, which helps in the development there. Public information coordinator. Um, they they're having one of that, which I think, based upon all the information that's going to be out there, because the MTSS will be eventually shared with parents also, so they're going to have more access to their student, and so there's a lot of information in the school that they're going to be covering. Um, we lost the 1/3 wellness coordinator grant because it expired, so we now have that, and we're in the capital, you'll see that we're going for 2 more of those buses, those mini buses. And so we need 2 drivers. They have proven to be a significant cost savings over time. Although, if you do go and park in the parking lot, they are taking all the good spots for an evening meeting because they
Well,
now
it does give you an idea of just how many of the Suburbans we've bought because it's really, there's just a line of them.
Yes, really. I noticed that, but they're taking all the close spots to the walk
They
in if you don't
are.
get in steps. Um, the DEA contract is costing us about 2.34. Um, there's some other contracts in there that are of a lesser amount that's costing 2.5%. Non-certified contracts that we'll probably see is 3.5. Significant salary savings of a little over a percentage. The ESY has some additional wellness grant compression is adding not even something worth mentioning. So on the big things, when I'm looking at them, on the curriculum, it's $680,000 for these coaches. That's the big number there. The other number that they're saving in curriculum is that using less textbooks, which to me, it's about blooming time. If we're doing everything automatic and kids have pads and other things that we're supplying in the high school, why we're still buying books made no sense. When the lesson can be taught and the student can read and other things like that on a computer or can have sheets if that's what's necessary. But to me, on the curriculum, those were the two main issues. Do you agree with that, Beth?
Yeah, I agree with that. I will
Let
say
me
for my
kinda-
daughter's like US history class, she doesn't have a textbook. She has like a stapled together handout of like original documents because they're just doing it with, the city on a hill speech, that all that sort of thing. Just that's her textbook, if you want to call it that. And then everything else is just given to her in class by the teacher lecturing. Seems like a lot cheaper than buying a US history textbook.
So, because I'm so used to 7:30 meetings, Peter and I walked in a little bit late and missed the first part of the special ed meeting. So, Laura and Beth, can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on special ed other than the $1 million that we're saving on that? There's also a consortium going on between three towns. This is
New
something that
Canaan, Wilton, and Darien. There's going to be a consortium. Yeah, the special ed department. It's not just that there's about $1 million in savings from tuition from non-public schools. Also, $100,000 from under pupil evaluation. With and then like smaller numbers like $20,000 less for contracted occupational therapy, that kind of thing. So, and then the expenditures are in like speech and professional learning and those drivers who are driving all the Suburbans. So it is much cheaper than having buses, but obviously you have to pay for the drivers. And then the one that I feel like they glossed over fairly quickly, but like the public school tuition, that's something I don't fully understand. Like who we're paying tuition to. Is that like if
CES.
Stanford has a okay.
No, we're paying CES.
Okay.
CES is a collective school in Trumbull that services Fairfield County, and it does handle some behavioral issues as well as in the past. Again, this is 15, 20 years ago. I haven't seen what was going on lately, but it was a very good autism program that they were running. And it's now run by Luke, our former Oxridge
from Oxridge. Oh.
principal. Yeah, yeah. And he was an excellent, he's the one who actually championed and put in all the whiteboards. He has a doctorate from Columbia. He was still working on his master's. And then became the principal for Oxridge for a lot of years. So, and was really the lead teacher when the five elementary schools talked. But he did a lot of the whiteboard creation and other things that they're still using. So, but he, I believe, now runs CES. So that's a collective school that is much less than if you have to send somebody to a private outplacement.
And the shared consortium is very interesting and very promising, but nobody really everything is so subjective to the needs of individuals that we don't really know the cost savings on what that potential can mean to us, right?
Well, that's not really true. See, you first have to go at a holistic view. Back when Brenner was the superintendent, the concept was that we're outsourcing students for certain um, areas that they need to. I don't want to call it a disability, but for other things that have to be addressed, like um, dyslexia was one where a lot of students were outsourced to that's school. It starts with a W, but I always forget.
Oh, Windward.
Windward, thank you.
Yeah,
Um, and so, if you notice that you have a number of students that has a similar need, it is always better to develop the capability to serve those students in-house. And so many of our teachers have been trained on dyslexia. And in fact, some of them have in fact been trained to be instructors to instruct other teachers on how to handle dyslexia. And so some of those have been brought back in-house. This is similar that for the longest time, um, the law says that for some students with significant disabilities, their residential town is responsible for services up until the age of 22. And for many years, Ridgefield had a very good program where everybody was sending their kids. Um, so I'm not sure what the consortium is going to be addressing, but when we find that there's other local schools that have similar needs or a base of students that make enough that we can join together, it reduces our cost of having to outplace or receive other services. And that's the concept of the consortium.
Right.
So that in and of itself should save because the thing that New Canaan is doing now, the next one might be in Wilton or in Darien. And we'll develop the expertise in here with the other two school districts to establish what is required to make sure that we're going to be able to meet the needs of the students that will be sending to any of the schools. And it was agreed that there's a tuition that will be paid to New Canaan for servicing these children. So that's part of what you look to do in order to reduce the high cost of special ed, which has been a burden for not just Darien, but if you think Darien has a burden with this, the inner city schools are being slaughtered. So that's part of the reason why we are constantly saying that the excess cost fund needs to have more money than they've put in. And it's not just for Darien; it's for the entire state as these costs increase. You know, so
I thought that Katie Lublin had mentioned something. She always has like profound insight and questions about. She said, "Can we look back to look forward, like the whole picture? Like over the years, there's been certain special education issues, but we don't have like, hey, here's the snapshot of the past 5 years or 10 years, and this is what we can look." So nobody's really presented, hey, this is what we're spending on this specific deficit that we don't have, but New Canaan has. And we have 7 students that need this, and we're going to be actually saving, even though we're going to be paying tuition to New Canaan. Like, that is not.
that's how this thing was set up. So it's not that we don't have it.
Okay, so
And quite honestly, it's only because I've been around for a while, a long while, that I understand the history of what's transpired in special ed.
And the difference between how Dr. Byrne is running things is we're not seeing the level of detail. It's very like, okay, here's the trust, and I don't really, unless I could drill down on the numbers. Do we have the numbers in the budget book?
There usually is a special ed annual presentation where you have what are the high needs and low costs. So,
Page 231.
yeah, let's go through some of the concept on special ed. I did an analysis about 15, 20 years ago because Darien wasn't running a Cadillac program. It was running an Austin Martin program. But it mattered who you are, whether or not you're getting certain services. All right. And special ed was going to soon be higher than town budget. So we did some research on it and presented it to F&B and later to the Board of Ed because they wanted to attack it and found that they couldn't. The average cost of a special ed student is twice the cost of a regular student. So if we're spending $25,000, the average cost of a ed student is $50,000. Now, if you have, there's about 13 categories of special ed. Some are low cost, like other health impaired. If you have somebody who, let's say, has leukemia, but they're in remission, they're in that category until not, and then they go into a higher category, providing consulting and education tutors. The high cost are 4 to 5 times the average special ed student. So if the average cost for a special ed student is $50,000, the cost for a high needs student is between $200 to $250. Now, part of the reason that we did this analysis is that if we have just the breakdown of our students between high cost and normal, we can quickly multiply that out and see if the special ed budget is within the range of what those numbers are. And we were able, and that's part of the reason why we did this. We also had, because we were accommodating parents, children like other health impaired is one of the lowest costs. For the longest time, ADD kids were in that category. All right. And yet the special ed administrator was calling it a high cost category, which every research that I looked at from Peabody, Columbia, every place else said, no blooming way should that be occurring. And what we discovered was that certain students were being put in there, even though they should have been in a high cost category, because, and going 20 years ago, mind you, because parents didn't want their child classified with that area, and we accommodated, which basically was wrong because those numbers were reported to the state and that state reports it to the federal government. So we were giving misinformation, and we were also not allowing us to do appropriate budget analysis. That person is no longer with us. So look, and then we went through a period of how to cut special ed costs, which created certain outplacements, which is why we had a rise in that, and resulted in several people resigning from the administration. So there is a history here. And I'm not mentioning anybody's names, if you've noticed. But we do have the analysis of what our groupings of students are. And how to do that. And that actually started with Brenner, who came in to really fix the problems that we had. And the Fitch Academy was created because many of the kids that were in Fitch would have been outplaced. for social emotional other things, and now there's
Or they
still
were refusing to go to school and we had to pay for tutors to tutor them at home.
I'm calling that social emotional.
Yeah.
So, so now we created an environment where kids actually came back to go to Fitch. At the same time, Brenner asked the Board of Ed whether or not we should invite other towns, and the board said no. And now we're at the point that it doesn't matter because Stanford, New Canaan, and several of our other communities have established a similar environment there. So, you know, um, that was that board's decision. So I'm not saying it was the right one or the wrong one. It was that board's decision. So there is a history, and we do know what students, if you look at the classifications, if you get into a higher needs classification, you usually find that they have multiple classifications of higher needs. So you might have a learning disability, you might have a speech disability, you might have a hearing disability, and so the child, and they may be ADD along the same time. And please understand the uh, part of the how do I put it? I have a bipolar son. I'm very open about that, who's been hospitalized several times for suicidal thoughts. So when I talk about mental health, it's not something I support. It's a very personal thing for me. He's 34, and he's the only person that if they call me, I don't care who I'm with. I could have an audience with the Pope, and I'm taking his call. Um, so, um, so when you're looking at some things like that, um, there are you used to be able to tell that somebody was bipolar when they were in their late teens, early 20s when they attempted suicide. We're now finding it earlier. And Mike, you may want to help me on this if you have knowledge on it. The same way that medical has produced all these drugs and other things like that, part of what has happened is the diagnostic techniques has also expanded significantly in the last 20, 30 years. So children who we thought were just depressed in the elementary schools and they were giving them antidepressants was the wrong treatment because by giving them an antidepressant, if they were bipolar, they went into a manic phase. And the manic phase is more dangerous depression phase for suicide. So we know things now. And because diagnostic skills are better, children are being identified sooner. Um, I didn't find out that I was ADHD until my children were diagnosed. I just accepted I was going to get a C or D in conduct. It was like, couldn't help myself. Why are we still talking about this? I understood in the first 3 minutes, and now I'm antsy. So there's a lot of things that we didn't know that are now diagnosed. And that's part of the rise, as well as, we don't call somebody autistic anymore. It's across the autism spectrum because it covers a wide range of things. And you have kids that are brilliant who have Asperger's, and you have others who have greater needs. So that's part of the increase in why special ed populations have grown over the years. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that or.
The only thing I'll say in regards to like how we're now looking across the spectrum of like we're addressing needs in the elementary school. Some needs, of course, obviously don't pop up then, but like we've got a bulwark in place sort of throughout the spectrum of the schools to try and catch as many kids as we can as early as we can.
That's correct. And I'll go through the evolution of that. We used to have something called the discrepancy model, which typically showed up when a child went from fifth grade to sixth grade or from eighth grade to ninth grade, where they were no longer performing. Second to third was the other major area where kids were no longer performing. And that's when they were tested. And that's when they were caught with a disability. And in most of these disabilities, if you catch it before the age of 10, give the child the tools to overcome them, they have a greater opportunity to not have that go. Then we went, and I always, because I came from banking, SRBI became the next model that we were using, which would catch children earlier. There were some skills that were being and tools being taught. And if greater needs were there, then they would go into the special ed. If not, then they would hopefully be able to move out of that program because they were able to be caught up. Now, what we're doing with all of these coaches for instructional, with the methodology that was talked about for the behavioral aspects of it, which have risen significantly, partially due to COVID, and with the other literacy attempts, it accomplishes two things. Number one, the goal is to give children the tools that they need to overcome that bump in the road that they're fixing. But of equal importance is you have bright kids who aren't performing, they're having a reading disability or they can't do math. And then what happens is the social emotional aspects start to take over. And so if you don't catch it in time, you're not only working with teaching them skills, but you have to unravel and take the onion skins off of their social issues, the other aspects that they've experienced because they can't perform and they think they should be able to. So all of these programs, the MTSS, the coaching that's going on, the behavioral that's going on, is to be able to work with students as early as we can to give students tools so they can succeed. Does it save us money down the road because they may not be going into special ed? Yes, but it also may mean we're catching some students early enough that they're getting special ed services sooner. So that, you know, it at the end of the day is, and that's one of the good things of the MTSS, is that it's an individual that we're looking at, and that's being analyzed. And programs are being surrounded by the individual. So a teacher that has 22 kids in the class may have 22 different programs. And so those blueberries that I said were ripe, well, you're giving them advanced work. The other ones that are a little immature, you're helping them to catch up, and it's tools to get there. And the ones that are in the middle are always the ones that are in difficulty. It just happens that way. But they have a basic education. And I think a lot of what's going on is us trying to do that, which still is the end result, is that graduate student that Dr. Byrne constantly talks about. Go ahead, Laura.
And how does the state reimburse you?
I'm sorry?
The reimbursement from the state for the special ed.
Yeah. So that's excess cost reimbursement. The way that works is they calculate out what the average cost is, and they do that up at the state. And any expenses 4.5 times that student is put in, is available for reimbursement. All right. Now I'll give you some nuances to that. If we have to outplace a student and they're sent to a school that is not certified by the state of Connecticut, we do not get reimbursement. And there are many schools that they do inspect, but there's probably they could add a couple more into that program that would help us, because sometimes you're just waiting for an opening in one of those schools so you can put a student in there. Then from there, where they've evaluated and put into categories who gets reimbursement for what. So the major cities, they're getting 100% reimbursement if it's over that threshold. So just because I like round numbers, if our average student was 20,000, then our cutoff would be 90,000. And if we spent 120, that was $30,000 available for reimbursement. The major cities, or those that are qualified in that category, get 100%. There's another category between us and them, which may get 80 to 90%. And then the towns that I typically refer to as the Gang of 20, which are the wealthier communities within the state, we get lower reimbursement. And that's calculated because a pool of money is given by the legislature into the reimbursement. And then based upon all of the amounts that are submitted by the various towns, they determine what the actual reimbursement rate is. So we could budget, but if there were a lot of submissions, we could only be getting 67%. Or if there aren't as many and they put more money in, we could get 75% back from that. But it's within that range that we get. So it's not a specific range because the state doesn't know how many expenses are going to be submitted to them for reimbursement. Then they have to calculate based upon who gets what percentage, and then they determine what the percentage reimbursement will be. Submissions happen in December, another one in March, and then there's a year-end reimbursement for things that may go afterwards that wasn't known in the March timeframe. The reimbursement for that is included in the educational cost sharing, but that doesn't end up in the Board of Ed budget because it comes in after June 30th and it goes into the town budget. There's a lot of stuff stuck in my head. You do this for 15, 20 years. It's sort of like just is there. But yeah, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about because all that stuff that I just said, I really want this team to start to develop that subject matter expertise. So, and I'm going to sort of transition over a little bit to the Board of Selectmen budget. So those that have the fire departments and fire marshals, you should know that it's now taking us 4 years to get a fire engine. And what happened in Greenwich was they were delaying and they had to buy used fire engines because they had ones that weren't working and it's taking them 4 years as opposed to what it used to take 18 to 24 months. A lot of towns use their ARPA money for fire engines. So part of what the town should be doing is figuring out what we need in 4 years from now and putting in the order now, because we typically don't make payment to the fire engine company either until the first block is built, which is 25%, or till we get delivery, which could be 4 years out, which is part of the reasons why we moved, and F&B was responsible for moving for an accrual system that was taxing people now for fire engine they would never see to a bonding issue. And when we do get a fire engine, if we don't want to bond it, we rescind the bond and pay out of the general fund. So we have that option. So that was one of the things that we were able to do. But you should know that how that works on the fire engines. You should know what the fire engine plan is. You should know that the fire marshal has to hire an FTE, which we talked about last year. You should know that the fire marshal went to the Board of Selectmen and increased the rates. You should know that every year, part of the reason why we're getting an extra fire marshal is that we have to inspect every one of the apartments for their fire alarms. We're not paid for that. We're paid for that up front, and we don't get it later. We do get payment for inspecting businesses or new companies when they come on. And we get paid initially when when we're making sure that the apartments can be occupied. So that's sort of like the subject matter expertise. Also on emergency services, there's an agreement between Post 53 and the EMS that we're using from Stanford that they're reimbursed for insurance. And if it doesn't meet a certain amount, then the town makes up the difference. I don't remember what that percentage is or what the contract is, but somebody in this committee or two people in this committee should know that. And that's why when you're given this assignment, not only are you responsible for the budget, but you're also responsible to follow things during the year and be a liaison to that committee. Um, go to the meetings. Louisa was on for a while. I believe on February 12th, Jeremy is going to the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee for their meeting. And I've attended that meeting every year simply because listening to Jeremy is great. And I always learn something from him. But he's going to talk about that in the building department and their revenues and their capital needs at that meeting. And by the way, after the committee asks questions, we can. So those are things to start to develop and part of what I've wanted to make sure people are understanding. I'm not going to be here forever. Go ahead, Laura. You got to unmute yourself.
It's okay. What I was going to say, we're off on a different tangents. It wasn't really that big of a deal.
No, go ahead. I love tangents. I live on.
What I was going to say is, I lost my train of thought. When we were talking about special ed, I should have written it down. It'll come back to me. Don't worry. If it's something.
And by the way, to the follow-up of the text and email, he gave us the initial thing that the literary coaches are still there, but he didn't. He's going to give us more information because Peter and I were talking to Dr. Byrne at the end of the meeting and explained to him that Liza and education and F&B have to explain the rationale for things. And I mentioned it to Peter, but also to Beth, since you guys will be giving this report. I'd actually, assuming Liza covers the numbers, all right? I actually want the focus of ours report to be more on what's the strategy, explaining what an instructional coach is really doing, explaining what they just were talking about, the gentleman was talking about with taking care of the behavior. I want our report to really focus on that versus the numbers, because
you just
hopefully Liza
me.
does that. Go back, Laura, quickly.
No, you reminded me very quickly that somebody was challenging empowering the teachers with the ability to manage behavior in the classroom. That child, years ago, my children are sophomores in high school. When they were in kindergarten, the method of handling behavior from whatever special education, special needs, was you pull the child out because that teacher wasn't capable of handling that behavioral issue. So during the Board of Ed meeting, somebody said, are we really, like, are we putting another burden on our teachers? Like, we're expecting so much. But the reality is that my child, who's able bodied, was very traumatized by seeing a student being constantly pulled out and empathetic to the point that the parent was like so enamored with my child and his concern for this little person that he didn't understand what the reality is. And the summary of is that teachers really do want to be able to handle this situation, and I think it's better for both the individual that has the behavioral issue, as well as the whole class environment. And I think that was a really interesting point that was brought up in this meeting last night. And I didn't, obviously, I'm sitting there thinking about this. I didn't make any public comment on it. It wasn't necessary. But I really do, it stayed with me and it stayed with the parent. And it actually brought us together because not many kids are as empathetic as others. But I think it is, a really great tool for a teacher to understand and be able to be equipped with.
And I agree with you. And as they said, some teachers just naturally know how to handle it.
Right.
There's others that we want to give them the tools. Now, that's not to say, because the administration and a number of years ago, we added some specialists there because we were having crises in our schools. So that's not to say that crises won't be handled. They will be. But this is how we can, you know, um, try to think what they talk about in police situations. But you try and diffuse the situation.
De-escalation.
Thank you. You've been helping me with my vocabulary a lot lately, Beth. Thank you.
I'm a veritable dictionary.
So yeah, we want to see how we can de-escalate and bring the child back in. But if you can't, then you know what the next step is. So these are tools. And by doing that, what you're also doing is, when properly trained, you're empowering teachers to ensure, because teachers get rattled also, you got to remember. And so with properly trained, even if there is a situation, they're able to be in an emotionally stable position to go back into the classroom and continue an exercise, as well as work with the student when it's necessary. So yes, I was really happy that they were doing that training. I agree with you, Laura.
Yeah, and I think with the, additional expenditure that we're having for the next fiscal year, I was very excited to hear, that there was some planning and that we're going to actually bring these elementary instructional coaches, to standardize best practice. And I think that's what we're all talking about. And I think what they also talked about when I listened into it is they were creating a dashboard where we could actually measure success. So I think there's great value with what Dr. Byrne and others presented. And, I had a lot of questions about it, but after hearing them, it really made sense to me that, I sit on a board when I look at cutting costs for like the hospital, but we never do it at the expense of quality. And I'm glad to hear that we're doing the same at Darien as far as our students. So I think
Well,
we're on the
actually,
right
that's
path.
why we ended up
Yeah.
with some lawsuits in special ed a number of years ago, because they were just cutting costs at the expense of students. So,
If
but
I could say one more thing, what I really like about this budget is it's student focused.
Yeah, for sure.
Everything that's happening in the budget there's a direct tie to like student outcomes, and that's of course the whole point of the educational system. So I just felt like it was really very direct, which I like to see.
well, and to add to that, they're focusing on teachers to focus on those students. They have data to focus on those students. That's the MTSS and the dashboard that you're talking about. And so that's part of the thing that will have teachers empowered, consistency in instruction, and end up with what we're all looking for, which is my joke is that all our children will become like Wobegon children above average. But that, sorry, you have to be a certain age to know that one. But that you're looking that the child meets their potential. That's what you're looking at. Not everyone's going to exceed. I have 4 different children. They're all different. But you want each one to beat their potential. So, all right. Do we have anything else on the budget? Does everybody understand the charge for being assigned to something? That's the thing that I want to stress. Last night, the Board of Ed the Board of Finance did their instructions and of who's doing what. I'm behind on listening to meetings because I have to listen to the front part of the special ed because I thought the meeting was at 7:30 instead of 7. And I'll listen to the Board of Finance, and tomorrow I'll send out who your partners are on the Board of Finance. Where's Bill? Bill was around here someplace. I think the same people that did Park and Rec last year, Jean, Patty, and Adele, will be doing it this year. Amy for PZ, and I don't know, Louisa, if you heard, they have a meeting in February. I have not heard back from Jeff Krause. I will be giving him a call, or Violet, who has taken over the other side. Education, we sort of, I speak to Liza, Beth, and Peter, who's not here. You can feel free to speak to Liza at any time, please. But we look at things differently. I have found that to be the case between our 2 committees. So, but yeah, we'll coordinate. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have Pierre, I have Charles. All in favor, say aye. And I apologize that this went on for an hour. Thank you all. See you February 4th or on video on Monday.
Very good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.